Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to the 66th Emerging Growth Conference and day one of our two-day super virtual investor conference. I'm Anna Berry. A few notes. Today we're running until about 5 p.m. Eastern time. Now, when we switch to the next company, you'll see a black screen for a moment. Don't go anywhere. That's us moving over to the next presenter. If there is downtime, refresh your browser. Everything usually works properly once you do that. Our platform does work best on Google Chrome, so if you're watching from an Apple device, you have to hit the play button to start the session. Now, during each company's presentation, you can submit questions through our webcast module, and we will attempt to address as many of these at the end of the presentation. Remember, all of our conferences, they're uploaded to the Emerging Growth Conference YouTube channel, so please subscribe, youtube.com/Emerging Growth Conference. Let's begin. We have ZYUS Life Science Corporation. It trades on the OTC Pink sheets under the symbol ZLSCF and on the TSXV under the symbol ZYUS. It's a Canadian-based life sciences company focused on the global development and commercialization of cannabinoid-based pharmaceutical drug product candidates and innovative exempt market therapeutics. We'll be speaking with Brent Zettl, CEO. Mr. Zettl is the pioneer of the Canadian medical cannabis industry. His journey began by co-founding Prairie Plant Systems, Inc. in 1988 and subsequently establishing CanMed Limited in 2014, followed by its parent company, CanMed Therapeutics, Inc. in 2016. PPS held the exclusive role of supplying medical cannabis to Health Canada from 2000 to 2014. CanMed successfully debuted on the TSX in 2016 and was then acquired by Aurora Cannabis Inc. in March of 2018 for an impressive 1.2 billion Canadian, marking it as the largest acquisition of the cannabis company at that time. Shortly after, Mr. Zettl founded ZYUS Life Sciences, and his significant personal investment of over $62 million into ZYUS reflects strong insider support and confidence in ZYUS's pharmaceutical drug product pipeline aimed at revolutionizing pain management for chronic and neuropathic pain with non-opioid-based treatments. It's an honor to welcome you to our conference today. Welcome, Brent.
Thank you very much, Anna, and thank you for that introduction. Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to be opening up the conference and with a dynamic presentation we have on the life science journey that we're moving into as it relates to pain management. One of the things that we did after I get started in the company was to focus on why would go back into this treating of pain. What's about this and in the cannabinoid space that's really of an advantage. And what we found is that there's still a compelling need. There's about 1.6 billion people globally suffering in chronic pain, over about 1 in 5 Americans, 1 in 4 Canadians. I think the 1 in 4, the higher ratio is because of our cold climate, but put that to the side. The truth is there's a compelling need of still needing pain treatments. Now, the opiates are a great pain drug that address the one side of a human being, and I think they're here to stay. The reality, though, is there's lots of different aspects of pain in a human being that can be regulated or can be modulated, but there really has been limited research in the other areas, and particularly since 1937, when Prohibition 1937, 28% of all medications were cannabis-based. So at that time, when the 37 Prohibition came into play, it wiped out cannabinoids used in the toolkit for doctors. 87 years later, we're still struggling to find alternative pain medications that at least supplant the opiates that are used. And to add to that, so from our vantage point, that was our paradigm. That's how we got started in this journey. And through the patient that we've had, over 50,000 patients at one point, we would say that there is still a compelling need where cannabinoids have been and continue to be used for patients. Now, why go back into it from in the person? Was one of the reasons we started the company a few days later is we were just beginning to understand the formulation. One of the things that came to mind is that we had something unique within the formulation that transcended the generic versions of THC and CBD. We actually discovered CBC, which is cannabichromine, which is a unique non-psychoactive neuropathic pain cannabinoid that can be used within the formulation. So then we applied a 3-part API formulation. Now it's called trichomolan soft gels, and it's a 3-part API. And we're now moving this product drug product candidate through the regular FDA approval process with the goal to produce a identifiable, prescribable drug that the doctors can use and prescribe and can be used within the traditional medical system. That is our goal. So the vision really is about pain treatment. And we're looking at novel cannabinoids, which leverages that to get IP. We have a big IP portfolio. We have 14 patents we've applied for, and our first patent has been prosecuted successfully in 9 countries, and we're in a national phase entry of both the US and Europe, and we expect fairly soon responses on that. But it basically is a novel approach for this non-psychoactive based of one of the elements called CBC. It allowed us to then create the novel treatments, the novel pursuit of this. And so now we're looking at moving transcending beyond that to the next level where we could actually achieve the goal of having a identifiable drug through the FDA. So we're Canadian, the summary is we're a Canadian-based life science firm. We started in 2018, not shortly after the takeover by the previous company. 35 members of my team came and joined me. We're committed to delivering safer alternatives and as a addition to the toolkit for the physicians on the opiates after the 4 years of research. And of course, we've come up with now, after 64 different preclinical trials, we have over 7,000 pages of data that's non-clinical, and we have 12,000 pages of data that relate to our phase 1 clinical, and we're moving into phase 2 of the first drug product candidate. And the second one in the pipeline is right behind it, still finished phase 1. We have, as Anna was mentioning, we have strong insider support. Beyond myself, we still have a significant amount that the board and senior management team have also invested. Our focus is on, of course, on drug development. One of the unique parameters we have is we do have our own manufacturing capabilities of purifying and developing formulations that meet the ICH guidelines. So they have to be in the 99.6% purity classification in order to go into our drug products. But we did that primarily because of speed to development, but also because of the limitations within the international market for finding purified cannabinoids that can be used in clinical trials. So we had a long pedigree in developing and purifying cannabinoids previously to the previous company, that we just then transpose that and now have a system of developing our own manufactured products. A little bit of a risk managed thing. It worked well for us during the COVID years where we were able to address within it. We were less exposed to the supply chain limitations and interruptions as we were continuing to develop our program. So from our standpoint, we have a good pipeline. We have actually 3 drugs in the pipeline. The first one addresses chronic pain. The second one is looking to address neuropathic pain as it relates to cancer. And cancer sort of addresses the indication for both of them. And then we're looking for a third one, or we have a third one that relates to anxiety, depression. Now we have, looking at a global market, it was $80 billion in 2020, moving into a target growth by $162 billion by 2030, with 11.5 million adults reporting of misuse of opiates. We think a lot of the opiates are overprescribed beyond simply because they're trying to stretch into areas of pain that aren't really the right use of those, where a cannabinoid formulation would better address those kind of things. Of course, a deep experience that we have and a whole series of patents that are protecting our flanks as we go into the development of this. Now, I'm not going to go into details on the value driven. We do have our presentation that, as Anna said, that will be available from a video conference later, but also on ZYUS.com. If investors want to go, they can see this site. This particular presentation is going to be updated later today. We have the old one up, but this new one will be put up. So I won't go into it, but this basically emphasizes the fact that we were focused on developing the technology, getting the phase 1 clinical trials properly done, the preclinicals properly done, and filing the patents properly and getting the manufacturing up and running over the first 4 years. Our team, we have a CFO, John Hishka. He joined us 2 years ago. He's got a long, deep experience in the life science space. Keith Carpenter, Chief Strategy based out of Toronto. Dr. Lionel Mark de Chabray is our Chief Medical Officer, based out of Ontario as well. And then we just recently announced yesterday, you'll see a VP of Clinical Research is Scott Livingstone. He was the president of the Saskatchewan Health Authority for a number of years, and also with the Cancer Agency. Good fit. Our board of directors, our chairman is actually from St. Louis. It's Richard Hoyt. He is actually formerly with Mallinckrodt for 40 years. He's now with another company startup, and he is our chairman of our board. Brings a depth of knowledge as it relates to controlled substance and development of drugs that go into the true FDA-approved drug process. John Knowles is my former CFO of CanAmed, but he's also a very well-rounded CFO from public co-experience. Garnet Weber comes as a IT specialist in marketing, locally develops a small business entrepreneur. Wayne Brownlee is a former CFO of Nutrien. Some may have heard of Nutrien, large potash corporation. It was previously a potash corporation. And Dr. Charlotte Moore Hepburn, she is a doctor at Children's 6 Hospital in Toronto. From a strategy perspective, we're focused, everything begins with the market. Of course, the pain space is a large space. There's been a few candidates, a lot of research on trying to do harm reduction on opiates, but very thin as it relates to new alternatives that would look at truly addressing the other aspects of pain. But the need is still there. Looks like from a spend perspective, the market size going to $162 billion by 2030, just clearly driven by the baby boomer demographic and the fact that there's still a large unmet need despite the amount of opiates that are still on the market today. Chronic pain market, it looks like about 1.6 billion people annually affected. So we know there's lots of room for development in the market. Part of it has to do with this endocannabinoids, the relation with pain management and cannabinoids is the fact that when we were in the previous company and previous presentations, when we ran the data on the 48,000 patients, we found that 58% of those patients were using a cannabinoid for managing pain by prescription. And then another 19% by neurological disorders. And it has to do with, it addresses key elements of what's called the endocannabinoid system, our natural cannabinoid system. But the truth of the matter is, by rendering to practice in real time, patients, if you grab a patient population, 58% of them are using it for managing some form of pain as it relates to it. Now, is there a market for stuff that's a cannabinoid based? Well, this is in Canada and US, the usage by prescription in Canada for cannabinoids usage for pain, not for pain, for actual all conditions of medical. But it was 409 million in 2022. It was 10.7 billion in the United States in 2022. But what it speaks to is there's about, if you transpose a 58% onto that, roughly 7 billion a year is already being spent out of pocket between the two countries on cannabinoids to manage pain. So it's not if there's a market for the use of this, it's more of a question, can we basically move beyond a genericized complement of products to a new approved FDA drug that can capture the value and actually afford us to invest into all the clinical trials and be able to make the true medical claims that are associated with the types of claims, what type of pain that we're targeting. That's really at its heart, right? That's the strategy. Now, the strategy worked for GW. A lot of you know the story. Of course, as they started in 2013 successfully with an IPO, they focused on CBD, cannabidiol, focused and filed the patents really only in 2015 as it related to epilepsy and the Dravet syndrome. And then they got an orphan drug designation. And as it goes, the model is they use that single cannabinoid purified and then actually had to prove that it worked, got approval as a drug, and then they sold to Jazz for $7 billion. When they started with $131 million in 2013 and sold for $7 billion to Jazz. Many of you know the story, but we're basically following the same playbook, is that we really are focused on purified cannabinoids that are going through the traditional drug development process using the US FDA as our authority on that approval process. Another case study is more recently, we've been compared to something in the Vertex with their candidate drug product candidate VX548. Its focus was on diabetic neuropathy was the application. It's for acute pain. Why did I put this up here? Again, it speaks to this idea of a non-opiate treatment that can deal with pain. And on the day they announced their phase 2 results, of course, many of you know in the audience that it jumped significantly on the day. The value was about $12 billion on the day value for their announcement of a non-opiate treatment that could manage some pain in the phase 2, giving some confidence that there's going to be a treatment in the future. What we're focused on is that we're focused on the channels of pain that are not where the opiate doesn't have an influence on, but are unique in that way. So from our vantage point, our target is, again, the endocannabinoid system was our our hallmark, where cannabinoids that we have purified are involved in what's called the CB1 and CB2 receptor. They're a normal action. Most people in the space understand that, but it is a newbie. It was only really discovered in the early 90s, 1990, 1992, respectively, for the two receptors. So we're still a long way from understanding how it works in the human body. But in our case, going beyond our cannabinoids, we find that we actually are in the cannabinoid formulation that we have, the three-part API with CBC, CBD, and THC as part in equal parts within our formulation. We found through both the molecular markers that we're seeing in the chronic pain models and animal models and in the non-opiate studies, we found that there's other areas of modes of action that where our formulation has been involved with, evidenced by what's happening at the molecular level, but also at a full animal level, mammalian model. So one of them is what's referred to as a trip ion channels, a transient receptor potential. So it modulates the activity of several trip ion channels, leading to the desensitization of sensory neurons. So it's like when it's in the area where, if you know, when you go into a cold water in a lake when you're swimming, and then eventually you warm up, that is the trip channel response. And we find that our cannabinoids are involved in that particular area of a human being. Inflammation is another source of pain, and our formulations seem to be pro-inflammatory cytokines that lead to this, but we reduce it. It seems to have some lowering effect in that space by the molecular markers that we have. And then the last is where there's a similar mode of action, the voltage-gated ion channels, particularly the sodium channels. We see that particularly CBC is involved in the reduction of that generation and the propagation of the neuron action potentials. So getting more technical, that's what we've seen as a mode of action in our formulations. And what it speaks to is that it goes beyond what the opiate channels are doing. So what the opiates in the endogenous opiate system that has 9 receptors, ours is focused on other things that could be beneficial within a platform as it addresses pain management. So here was the aha moment that our 3-part formulation works. And this is an example. This is a bar chart of a population of rats. And the gray bar that you see here is, if I can bring my cursor down, the gray bar here is basically a control where they were just given the olive oil. This light blue bar here was pregabalin. The rats were treated with pregabalin. This dark blue bar was where the 1-to-1 ratio of THC and CBD, and this teal bar is basically the 3-part API trichomelin. Now, this is what's called mechanical hyperalgesia, so that's basically the fancy word for how a rat moves its limb, and it's been injured under SNL or a severed nerve ligation. So what it points to, though, we had significant response in the movement compared to pregabalin and THC, the 1-to-1 ratio, meaning that at the end of it, we had superior analgesic effect when compared to pregabalin. That was our aha moment a few years ago, and this is what we based our patents on, that we actually found better response in pain management when it came to a whole mammalian system. And it had a prolonged effect on the left-hand side. You can see there the charts that are there. It speaks to the fact that it actually had a prolonged effect as well. So that's the other benefit that we had. So this is the proof in the pudding, is the fact that we were compared to the positive control pregabalin, but it also outperformed just the 1-to-1 ratio of THC and CBD. So it's a 3-part API that was the winner on this particular treatment that we had. So where we are today, we have the first drug product candidate. We completed a phase 1. I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. We have the second drug product candidate that has just going to be entering into 1B. It did a part of a 1A. And then we have the third drug product candidate that's still in the validation phase as we speak. We are moving into phase 2. But moving on, so this is basically the first in human safety tolerability. We just completed that final report in December of last year, November. We announced that we finished. Now we're embarking on the phase 2 study in order to get a signal on efficacy, pain, particular pain efficacy signal, dosing, and of course tolerability. And then the second one, the second drug, our research drug, is going to be an enabling study. We're looking at safety and toxicology of that as well. So basically, from a phase 1 trial, it was well tolerated. We had 97.5% enrollments participating, completed the study, which is fairly high. We had no stoppages. We had no pauses on the study. But also, the most importantly, we had no serious adverse events. Our top adverse events, which are just lower than the serious, were euphoric mood, somnolence, which means sleep, and fatigue. And so then it's targeted on the endocannabinoid system, but we found that it's well tolerated across all the patients that we had enrolled in the study. And now we're moving on to the phase 2 trial. Phase 2 is going to be in Canada. It'll be at 6 sites. It's focused on cancer pain. We're addressing cancer pain, an acute pain scale on a scale of 1 to 10. It's those between a 6, and a 9 we're going to be targeting. It's going to focus on 126 patients, but it's going to take us 2 years, but we're expecting to have some preliminary results within 12 months of launching of the program. So we're really looking forward to this as we move into the next phase of this development. Our clinical advisory committee with Dr. Laura Marc Deschabray as our chair, and then we have on our committee was Audrey Hakioja. She was a VP of Roche for several years in managing oversight of clinical trials. Dr. Mary Lynch, who's a pain psychologist who's done a lot of work specifically at Dalhousie in cannabinoid research. Dr. Alice Spearling, she's the University of Ottawa, and she's an epidemiologist, and she brings a lot of depth of statistics particularly. And Dr. Cedric Francois, which some of you may recognize that name. He is the president CEO of APLS, but he is also the chair of the bio of harm reduction with opiates at Bio. And we've known each other, and he's been there, done that, so they bring a collective strength as it comes to going through the FDA process. Our foundational products that we have, of course, we have our own products that we're currently moving into Canada, that we have within the Canadian landscape, more from a tolerability and understanding what we have to do and keeping the team warm on this. We have oils and gel caps that we have in the market today, and it also leverages on our manufacturing that currently is there today. So why think about ZYUS in terms of where it could be? By comparison, just in terms of where we are to Vertex, we're 1/1200th the value of Vertex today on a market cap basis, but we have a similar we have technology within the non-opiate space that is targeted on pain. We're following a trajectory that is supported by patents, but also supported by now 20,000 pages of data in the non-clinical, preclinical, and phase 1 clinical work. So we're really taking a strong approach on this. We have the 14 patents have been filed. We do expect to see some focus on the approvals within Europe and the US on the first drug product candidate. Certainly within a year, we're hoping for at least. We have strong demand. We have a strong pipeline, 3 drugs in the pipeline. Of course, we de-risk with the manufacturing. We have a quality team, a team that was been there, done that over 20 years in the space. And of course, we are fast adopters of technology as we learn as we go. And that is it for my presentation part. And I'm now ready, Anna, to open up the floor for any questions that may be.
Great job, Brent. Yes, we do have some questions for you. Starting with Ray Wolfson asks about your CBC. He asks, is this your discovery or has this been in play with other pharmaceuticals in the past? And what's the main advantage of this ingredient and is it patentable?
The answer is yes, this is our discovery. Nobody knew that CBC, cannabichromene, was a non-psychoactive pain potential drug. Nobody knew that. And so when our filings that we did file for patents. We've filed for 14 patents. And the first one has been prosecuted in Canada and 8 other countries, and now is in national phase entry in the US and Europe. The second patent, though, related more to specifically CBC. It's also in national phase entry. It's just further behind the first one. So the answer is yes, it's patent protected. The uniqueness of CBC is that it works on the more in the CB2 more in the direction of the CB2 receptor. It is more aligned with the neuropathic channels. But we found that as you add it to a complement of the other cannabinoids, it seems to work in concert, adding value in different aspects within the human system. The halo effect of that CBC, though, it allows us to leverage the THC and CBD and bring them back into formulation, that we can garner the values of those as well within the formulation, so that when we go to the FDA for approval, that we have this compelling data that shows where it is working on a macro system or a whole system, a human being that is separate and above, or completely separate from the single-use purpose of pharmaceuticals. So it's a unique unique cannabinoid that we discovered, that we filed patents on, that we think this is what gives us rise to the ability to put this into clinical trials by having it protected by the patents, but also then put into the FDA process.
Perfect. Russ Spector asks, in what form are your 3 drugs going to be applied to the patient? Is it pills, injections? If you can explain that.
It's going to be in soft gels. Everything we have is in soft gels. So the formulation we find with cannabinoids is best preserved in olive oil. And the reason is because it protects, it gives us the longest shelf life of the cannabinoids in that suspended fluid. So we have olive oil is our carrier oil, and we have them in soft gels. So all the products we have will be presented as soft gels to patients. So it'll be an oral soft gel.
And Carol Fleming asks, are you looking to go into manufacturing once approved, or are you going to sell the rights or partner with a major for production?
We have the ability to have our own manufacturing now, and it's mostly at a scale that we can live with. What we're really looking at doing is we're looking at potentially moving to as it scales up. Of course, the options have to continue to be explored, but we have the technology to scale up. So the focus is really getting the manufacturing sufficient enough to get through the clinical trial process and allow us to then ramp up slowly. But the plans that we have we're kind of open-minded about how the next set of expansion would go for the company.
And Vivian Johnson asks, how are you acquiring and producing or separating the active ingredients? Are you growing certain strands in a lab?
No, we are not growing anything. We buy raw materials and then we purify them. So we use an ethanol extraction facility for the herbal things, but the CBC, we do have it synthetically made and then purify it to that standard using our own lab techniques. So there's a lot of trade knowledge or trade secret, shall we say, in the manufacturing process. But at the end of the day, though, we have over 500 points of quality control in each of these, and we have all the standard things. It is, by the way, for your viewers, we do comply with it. We are EU GMP rated for our materials already, so that's why we're allowed to put it into clinical trials. So we have an EU GMP manufacturing facility that can do that. So that's what we have at the go right now, and so the future again remains to be open-minded about that.
And Andre Connor asks, how are you doing on your cash and raising capital with this economic environment we're in, specifically with interest rates? Do you have any financing concerns?
Well, every life science company has financing concerns, obviously, particularly in this bear market, the worst market last year in the last 30 years. However, that said, we did pull off an RTO with 27 million. It was 20 million we had to raise, and we bought at 7 million was in the shell. And that was a Herculean effort by the team, but we got it done. I think it was the largest RTO in Canada by 3x over our nearest competitor that year. So we have a good solid team and a good solid story and a good solid technology. And do we need to, as we move into this, we're going to obviously need to think about what the future holds, but we are aggressive, and we believe that we have the ability to get support going forward.
And talk about who your competitors are.
A lot of people, compare us to other, cannabinoid companies or cannabis companies, and that's not true. I mean, our competitor, is to some degree, the field is pretty thin. GW Pharmaceuticals was now owned by Jazz in the epilepsy space, was a competitor to some degree. They maybe with Sativex products could be a competitor with us going forward. Of course, anything that's non-opiate based medicine could also be a competitor. Obviously, Vertex's VX548, it could be VT548 could be a competitor to us. So we're looking more at the traditional competitors that are non-opiate based that are going for drug approval. And I have to say that the field is relatively thin at this point in time of true deniable drug applications through the FDA.
And Brent, we can close with this question. Talk about some milestones you plan to hit in 2024.
So 2024, we hope to have some preliminary results of our phase 2 in terms of efficacy. So when we get 50% of the patient enrollment, we want to blind that and show the preliminary efficacy results. We're going to have that. We're looking at being able to launch the second drug product candidate to finish some safety and toxicology work that we have to do in that particular space. And then we're looking at a potential phase 1B for that drug product later in the year. It's going to be our targets. And then we're going to continue to build the team. As you can imagine, we're small but mighty in some ways. but we are going to continue to add to that team, and we are going to be launching of course, the phase 2 clinical trial in 6 sites in Canada in the very near term.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the conference. I hope this is the first of many that you'll be joining us in the near future. Thank you, Brent.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, everyone, stay with us. We'll be right back.